surely become insane, and the anger I feel in my veins has stopped pouring out of the hole in my face and remains in my stained rib cage.
Broken by 14 with no chance for absolution, cause they refused to open their mind's eye and see we too are human. We were searching for joy with apathetic conclusions. We started savoring apathy and all of our bruises, and the songs we sung when our minds were done and our lungs bled, our tongues said we're done with the humdrum. We used to be so pure, so fragile and raw, but now we set campfires in car parks and cut corners on short walks.
Decay, and the world became a stage, complete chaotic how we played, and cryptic visions of us disposing of ourselves became sordid depictions of disposable wealth.
And the songs we sung when our minds were done and our lungs bled, our tongues said we're done with the humdrum. We used to be so pure, so fragile and raw, but now we set campfires in car parks and cut corners on shore walks.
Then she laid me down whilst I was in a drunken stupor, and she took my hand and she forced me to use her for things I desired nor for. My friend was asleep on the floor. I would ask myself constantly, am I remembering that right? A paralytic memory, hazy days of a night. Was I truly destroyed by an imperfect person? Was I just co-opting the curses of coercion? Well, after that event, my hair grew out, matted and frayed, like a rope you'd have to cut and burn to make usable again. But to assess my temperament, oh, the contours of my skull, I shaved off all my hair and saw I still could be well.
The songs we sung when our minds were done and our lungs bled, our tongues said we're done with the humdrum. We used to be so pure, so fragile and raw, but now we set campfires in car parks and cut corners on shore walks.
The light in my eyes reignited with a vengeance when I saw the sunrise around a campfire with my best friends. The light in my eyes reignited with a vengeance when I saw the sunrise around a campfire with my best friends.
And the songs we sung when our minds were done and our lungs bled, our tongues said we're done with the humdrum. We used to be so pure, so fragile and raw, but now we set campfires in car parks and cut corners on short walks.
Shit doesn't make sense. I was a victim of this bullshit comes and goes. Stood in a regress, but I can never know that I'm not feeling all.
Jordan sent the beat, picked up the pen and started to transcend to another dimension. Alba finna be beyond comprehension. Alba finna be beyond comprehension. Waiting for my respect, the talent presents itself. You boys were off yourself, seeing knowledge that we dealt. I've been feeling like I need to sit chat down a second. You won't get happy popping Zans and then even
Hi. Hi, Sage. How we doing today, chat? I'm gonna be honest. I am not doing so hot. But I promised to finish reading chapter 15 of The Stars and Their Children. And I'm gonna be real, I need the distraction. So, yeah. I miss you too, Sage. Are you okay? I'm just a bit stressed, that's all. These past couple days have been a bit stressful, but hopefully it'll be resolved soon. But yeah, I just figured I'd give a heads up to help you feel better soon. Thanks. Yeah, I figured I'd just give a heads up on where I'm at right now, in case you guys are concerned or wonder where did my energy go. But yeah, let's continue reading The Stars and Their Children. It's a nice story to read, so I figured it would be a very, very good distraction. Not just for me, but for any viewer that's also not doing very good right now. So far in this chapter, Wilbur was having a conversation with Filza. Wilbur opened up a bit about, like, his life back on Eldingvegger, and Filza opened up about, like, basically his backstory and how he and Wilbur aren't so different, and that scared Wilbur. This is where we left off, and I'll start here. Wilbur shook his head. That wasn't right. He wasn't like Filza. Even if Eldingvegger hadn't wanted him, he was Eldingvegrian. That was his home. Right? So lost in his own head, Wilbur didn't even realize where his feet were carrying him until he found himself standing outside of the doors that led into Filza and Technoblade's personal wing. The same doors he had to go through if he ever wanted to go to a training room. Clenching his jaw, Wilbur was hit with a sudden urge to see Tommy. Despite their arguing, Tommy knew him better than anyone else in the palace. Tommy could remind him where his home truly was. Tommy could remind him that he wasn't like Filza. I believe Prince Theseus is training with the Imperator right now, Wilbur told the guards standing on either side of the locked doors. I would like to go see him. One of the guards frowned, but before she could say anything, there was the sound of labored breathing as Jack caught up to him. Shit, man. You training for a goddamn marathon or something? Jack asked, forehead glistening with sweat. I want to see my brother, Wilbur told him, fixing his gaze on the doors. Tell them to let me in. Jack sighed, nodding at the guards. Let him in. After sharing an uncertain look, the guards relented, and the doors slid open with a soft hiss. Giving Jack a nod of thanks, Wilbur hurried into the wing of the palace that was most unfamiliar to him, with Jack stumbling over his feet to try and keep up with Wilbur's longer legs. Even though it had been a while since he'd been to the training room, Wilbur remembered the way without needing to think twice about which turns to take. Within a few minutes, he could hear the sound of Tommy's laughter echoing down the halls, and a lump formed in his throat when he realized he hadn't heard Tommy laugh like that in quite a while. His steps slowed. The training room's doors had been left open, and he stopped walking right before he reached the open doorway. From there, he could hear Tommy's laughs reverberating with the metallic sound of knives clashing. "You're such a bitch, Technoblade. Can't even disarm me if you wanted," Tommy teased, and Wilbur's eyes widened hearing Tommy call the Imperator by his first name. It made sense. Of course it did. Wilbur had stopped calling Philza by his title long ago, and with all the time Technoblade and Tommy spent together, of course they would have dropped the titles too. Still, it was a strange thing to hear. "Trust me, kid, I could disarm you if I wanted," Technoblade fired back, and there was another metallic clang. "Oh, really?" Tommy taunted. "What if I do this?" Suddenly, there was a loud grunt, and Tommy's maniacal laughter rang out. "What? You can't just climb on me, Theseus!" Technoblade exclaimed. "That's not how this works." "What?" Deciding to take a risk, Wilbur peeked his head into the doorway so he could see what was going on inside the training room. Tommy had somehow climbed onto Technoblade's back and had his arms wrapped around the man's neck like some kind of demented forest creature. Technoblade's dagger had been dropped on the floor, while Tommy was trying to press his to Technoblade's neck, although he was struggling to hold on the more Technoblade tried to peel him off. Excuse me. "You gotta admit defeat," Tommy declared. A wide smile stretched across his cheeks. "Then you could tell all your wives you were bested by the all-powerful Prince Theseus Thomasini himself." At this, Technoblade stopped trying to get Tommy off his back and frowned. "My wives?" "Yes, your many wives." "I wasn't aware I was married to anyone," Technoblade deadpanned, ignoring Tommy now as the boy wrapped his legs around his waist to hold on to his back better. "Are you telling me the Imperator of the Antarctic Empire doesn't get bitches?" Technoblade sighed, reaching up to pry the dagger out of Tommy's hands and tossing it to the floor. "I don't think you're gonna be able to climb on your opponent's back like some kind of rabid cat if you're in a battle, Theseus." "That's what you think," Tommy shot back, resting his chin on Technoblade's shoulder. "Also, you gotta stop calling me Theseus when it's just us. It feels fucking weird." A rock dropped into Wilbur's gut hearing that. Strangely enough, Technoblade didn't seem surprised by this. He just let out a soft laugh and reached up to get Tommy's arms away from his neck. "If I'm being honest, I kinda like Theseus better. It suits you." "But it's so boring and long," Tommy groaned, tightening his hold around the man's neck. "Fine. Tommy, will you please get off my back now?" Technoblade asked, looking like he was struggling not to smile. Tommy snickered as he let go of Technoblade, dropping to the mat with a soft thud. "Sure thing, Techno." No. Wilbur had to be mishearing things. That couldn't be right. Tommy couldn't be telling Technoblade, Imperator of the Arctic Empire, to call him by his personal name. There was no tension between them as Technoblade dragged a hand through Tommy's hair, making his curls stick up in every direction. Tommy didn't seem the slightest bit worried as he picked his dagger up off the ground, nudging Technoblade with his elbow once he straightened back up. When Technoblade looked at Tommy, there was so much warmth in his gaze, in his golden gaze. It felt like Wilbur was intruding on something personal. Nausea rose in the back of his throat. He couldn't be here. Without saying a word, Wilbur stumbled away from the doorway and turned back the way they came. When Jack opened his mouth to say something, Wilbur made a shushing gesture at him, before hurrying back out of Philza and Technoblade's personal wing. That wasn't how Tommy was supposed to be interacting with someone who wanted to take over their planet. He wasn't supposed to be laughing and teasing him, asking the Imperator to call him by his personal name and calling him by a nickname in turn. Tommy didn't smile or laugh like that with Wilbur anymore. These days, when he saw Wilbur, the only thing on Tommy's face would be worry or anger. And Wilbur knew it was for good reason, because he wasn't being nice to his little brother anymore. But Technoblade wasn't supposed to be nice to him either. And yet the two were close. So close in such a short amount of time. How the fuck had Wilbur missed that? Technoblade had to be manipulating Tommy, getting close to him to make him want to hand over Eldingvegger. It was twisted and cruel, but it was the only explanation Wilbur could think of. Technoblade had no reason to care about Tommy. He wanted Eldingvegger, and nothing more. Except Philza didn't have a reason to care about Wilbur either. He didn't have a reason to tell Wilbur about his childhood, or to threaten Quackity's life for hurting him, or to rest a hand on his face and gently trace the bruises under his eye. He called Wilbur Little Bird when it was just the two of them. And although Wilbur knew it had to be some kind of insult, a reminder that he was an inexperienced child compared to Philza, it never felt like that when he said it. If anything, it almost felt fond. Fuck. Philza was getting into his head, just like Technoblade was getting into Tommy's. The doors to the personal wing slid open as Wilbur stormed back into the main palace. He could hear Jack struggling to keep up with him, but he didn't bother to slow down. He had to get away from that training room. He needed to stay away from the throne room. Right now, Wilbur didn't want to think about either of those places, or the people inside of them. "Where are we going?" Jack called out behind him. Where was Wilbur going? He didn't know. His room sounded suffocating, but if he went to the library, Philza would probably find him. The waves in his mind were crashing so loudly, he couldn't even hear himself think. His chest was aching and there were so many different emotions spinning in his mind, he couldn't put a single name to any of them if he tried. He hated the mental image of Tommy smiling at Technoblade that kept replaying in his head. The ghost of Philza's hand was still resting on his face. If he tried to block all that out, he found his palms twitching, like he could still feel Nikki's webbed fingers squeezing his own. "Orpheus!" Jack suddenly shouted, and Wilbur was stopped dead in his tracks by the guard grabbing his shoulder. "What?" Wilbur snapped, whirling around on Jack. Jack flinched, startled by Wilbur shouting at him, and guilt joined in on the maelstrom in his head. Before he could feel too bad about it, though, Jack's expression was hardening. "Look, mate, I get it. You're fucking stressed. You can yell as much as you want, but that's not going to change the fact that I got a job to do. Tell me where you want to go, and I can get you there. But I'm not wearing my running shoes today, and I don't feel like chasing after a pissy prince." Squeezing his eyes shut, Wilbur tried to force out a slow breath from his nose. His breathing hitched. "I don't know where to go." "Do you want to go back to your room?" Wilbur shook his head. And not the library either. Another shake. My head just feels like it's gonna fucking explode, Wilbur admitted. His voice sounded far more broken than he meant it to. I don't know. I need to just not be here. Jack considered this for a moment before nodding. Alright, I can do that. Then, before Wilbur could say anything, Jack was grabbing his wrist and dragging him down the hall. Wilbur didn't pay attention to where they were going this time. Jack led him down several twists and turns, then up a flight of stairs to a second level Wilbur didn't even realize was there. The entire time they were walking, Jack kept a firm grip on his wrist, like he was trying to keep Wilbur from running away. In a way, it was almost laughable, but he also understood why Jack was doing it, considering Wilbur pretty much did run away earlier. They came to a small door that Jack used a scanner to open. The room was the size of a closet, with only a set of spiral stairs leading up inside of it. Jack led him up the steps, twisting around and around and around until they got to the ceiling, where a trapdoor sat embedded in the stone. Another scan and the trapdoor slid open. Jack climbed out first, and although Wilbur knew he should have been more hesitant, he was too caught up with everything else to second-guess anything as he followed suit. Ice-cold air slapped Wilbur in the face as soon as he was through the trapdoor. It was far colder than anything Wilbur had felt in the palace, and it took him a moment to realize that was because they weren't technically in the palace anymore. They were on a small landing on the roof of one of the spires. A thin metal fence was all that stood between them and empty air, with the capital city of Zephys 4 stretching out in front of them like a glittering sea of lights. Jack had settled himself on one end of the small landing, and while there wasn't much room up there, Wilbur did his best to sit on the other side. He leaned back against the wall, a frigid breeze making shivers run up his spine as he brought his knees up to his chest. It's fucking freezing up here, Wilbur muttered, although the cold was forcing his thoughts to slow down as he shifted his focus to staying warm. Jack snorted. Yeah, it is. You've been nice and cozy inside the palace this whole time, but this is what it's like the minute you step outside. A shudder ran down Wilbur's spine as he wrapped his arms around his knees. It's nice, though, he said, staring out at the dark metal structure spawning across the ice cavern. How'd you know this place was here? I'm literally a palace guard. I know this place like the back of my hand. Jack huffed. I actually come out here a lot, just to get away from all the bullshit for a bit. I wouldn't blame you if you've had to come out here after listening to me bitch someone out for the millionth time, Wilbur snorted, resting his head against the metal wall. Hold on, I'm cleaning my glasses. Instead of laughing at that like he expected, Jack shook his head. You're not that bad, man. If anything, you're 1,000 times better than any of the other royal pricks I've had to interact with before. Wilbur raised an eyebrow. I highly doubt that. No, I'm being serious. Sure, you're a bit high-strung, but you're not, like, taking it out on me or anything. I just get to watch you bitch out other people, which is honestly pretty entertaining. Jack said, grinning now. You wouldn't believe how boring this job gets sometimes. I was fucking pissed when I found out you and Quackity got into a fight and I wasn't around to see it. How about I just shove him again next time we see him? That way you can watch our round too. Wilbur joked, the waves growing quieter in his head. As fun as that would be, I'm pretty sure that would end up in Quackity getting his face sliced open by the Imperator, and I really don't feel like having to clean blood off the floor. He shot back. Like that, or the Emperor would straight up execute him, considering what Puffy told me he said to Quackity. The smile faded from Wilbur's face as he thought back to the day before. Another chill ran down his spine, and Jack's smile disappeared as well. I know this is way above my pay grade, so you don't have to tell me or anything because I'm just being a nosy prick. Jack began after a few minutes, keeping his eyes trained on the horizon. What the fuck's going on with you and the Emperor? Today you ran out of the throne room like you'd just seen a ghost or something. Hold on a second. Sorry, I'm just responding to an important email. Sorry, let's keep going. The wording of Jack's question would have made Wilbur laugh if it didn't also make him want to cry. Because in a way, he had seen a ghost while talking to Philza. The ghost of his past. A ghost of Philza's past. The way those two ghosts look almost the same. It's difficult to explain, Wilbur said softly, his voice almost being carried away by the wind. Philza just told me some things that I didn't really want to hear, and I got overwhelmed. He took a breath to steady himself, and was relieved to find his chest didn't stutter like it had before. We'd also been talking about some emotional shit, I guess, so I was already a bit more out of it than usual. Talking about emotional shit with Emperor Philza? The Ice King himself? Jack questioned. Yeah, I know. Wilbur snorted. I was surprised too. Though it's partially my own fault, because I was the one who got nostalgic first. He pressed his lips together, taking off his glasses and tucking them in his pocket. Got bad news about an old friend yesterday, so it just fucked me up a bit. Oh shit, so I'm sorry, man. Wilbur shrugged. It's whatever. She's missing, not dead, so at least there's that. But I'm obviously pretty worried about her. He paused then, thinking back to how blunt Jack had been a few minutes earlier before dragging him up here. You remind me a bit of her, I think. Jack frowned. I do? Only in a few ways, Wilbur clarified, wringing his hands together to keep them from going numb. You both can be pretty blunt if you want to be, especially when it comes to dealing with my bullshit. Ah, the very thing I've nearly gotten fired for, Jack chuckled, shaking his head. Guess it makes sense why you haven't complained about me to Puffy yet. You thought I was going to complain about you? Wilbur asked, furrowing his brows. Honestly, yeah? Most royals like you don't really appreciate the Jack Manifold charm. He joked, smiling to himself. Not that I care. I told you on the first day we met that I didn't care if you complained to Puffy, and I meant it. Wilbur laughed. Well, I can see how your charm might be an acquired taste, but I think it's refreshing. You get tired of the bullshit etiquette after a while. I can imagine you would. Jack nodded, still staring out at the horizon. A beat passed, then another. You know, you're not as bad as you make yourself out to be, Jack then said, fiddling with the cuffs of his sleeves. You say you bitch people out or whatever, and yeah, you definitely can be rude when people are rude to you first. But when you've met as many politicians as I have, you get a good sense for people. You're not a bad person, Orpheus. And despite all of Jack's brashness and blunt words, there is an overwhelming amount of sincerity dripping from his words. Despite the cold, something warm bubbled up inside of Wilbur at that. And he found a question he hadn't planned on asking falling from his lips. Would you say I'm anything like Philza? Wilbur asked, wincing at how fragile his voice sounded. Jack didn't respond immediately. He considered the question, biting the inside of his cheek as he folded his hands together. I'm not the kind of guy who's just gonna say the shit you want to hear, so know that I'm being totally honest when I say this. Jack began, choosing his words carefully. But yes, sometimes when I hear you talk to someone like I don't know, Rambu or Karl or even Schlatt. I feel like I can imagine what the Emperor was like when he was your age. Dread formed a tight ball in his stomach, and Wilbur grit his teeth to hold back a wince. That's not an insult, by the way, Jack added, noticing Wilbur's face. For all the shit I say, I admire the Emperor and the Imperator both so goddamn much. I'm really fucking glad I get to live here on Zephyr's 4 and not somewhere else like one of the planets that's under SMP's rule. Phil's and Technoblade are good leaders. They actually care about their people and aren't just in it for themselves. If we weren't happy with Phil as our Emperor, we'd be rioting in the streets and setting the palace on fire. Really? Trust me, no one knows how to riot better than the citizens of Zephyr's 4, Jack said, smirking now. Saying that you remind me of Filza is a compliment, Orpheus. Orpheus. It was so jarring to hear his formal name in a situation like this. When Wilbur was so raw and exhausted, feeling hollowed out by the icy wind howling across the rooftop. Wilbur, he corrected, his voice low. Call me Wilbur, Jack. It was the first time since he'd arrived on Zephyr's 4 that he'd granted someone permission to use his personal name. Up until now, he'd refused to show that kind of submission. He wasn't a part of Zephyr's 4, so he wasn't going to let anyone call him Wilbur. Not even Schlatt, despite the tentative truce they'd struck with each other. But Jack wasn't part of the game of politics. He was just a guard who saw everything and said nothing, who understood far more than he let on. Jack was silent for a moment, staring at Wilbur in blatant shock. I thought only friends were supposed to call you by your personal name, Jack pointed out. Wilbur thought back to Tommy and Technoblade. Yeah, they are, he nodded. I'd like to think I can call you a friend at this point. Oh. Jack blinked a few times, looking like he wasn't sure what to do with this information. Thanks, Wilbur. I appreciate that. He hesitated, saying his name, but there was something relieving about finally hearing someone other than Tommy or Amesy call him by it after so long. Before he could bask in the relief for too long, though, Jack spoke up again. Wilbur, if we're friends, then I need to tell you something, he said, not meeting Wilbur's eyes. When I first got assigned to you, I was instructed by Puffy to keep her updated on both you and Theseus. What you talked about, how you're acting, what your moods were. Creepy spying bullshit that I hated. So I always made my reports as vague as possible, because it just felt fucking wrong, you know? And I'm not gonna tell her about today, because I don't want to. I think it's a total invasion of privacy, so as far as she'll know, I just took you back to your room. Jack, Wilbur said, cutting Jack's rambling off. I assumed you were reporting everything we did back to someone the day we first met. There was a beat as Jack blinked at him. You knew? I mean, I didn't know for sure, but it's a pretty standard thing when you have other politicians staying on your planet. Guards are considered invisible, so they're pretty invaluable for getting information on the people you're trying to negotiate with, Wilbur explained, thinking back to the many times he'd kept his mouth shut while walking down the hallways with Tommy, because he knew Jack was only a few steps behind. Jack frowned. So that's just fucking normal? It is on a lot of planets. Wilbur shrugged, leaning back against the wall again. I was raised to be an advisor, Jack. I know exactly how this game is played. Shoulders sagging, Jack dropped his eyes to the ground. Oh fuck, man. I thought you were going to be pissed at me. Are you disappointed I'm not? No, but I feel like you should be. No, but I feel like you should be, Jack exclaimed, and the warmth in Wilbur's chest grew, hearing how distraught Jack was over the whole thing. It was oddly reassuring that Jack wanted to confess his spying to Wilbur. In a way, it almost made Wilbur want to trust him more, because he so clearly didn't want to be doing it. That didn't mean Wilbur was going to spill all his secrets to Jack, though. Even if he considered Jack a friend, he was still part of the Antarctic Empire. That was something they were never going to be able to get past. But Wilbur didn't hold it against him. To be totally honest, I actually really appreciate that you told me, even if I already knew about it, Wilbur admitted, smiling now. But dramatic confessions aside, can we go inside now? I can't feel my hands anymore. Immediately, Jack's eyes widened as he scrambled to his feet. Shit, yeah, of course. Here, let's get inside before Phil executes me for turning you into an icicle. A few minutes later, the two were back on the main level of the palace, walking back to Wilbur's room. Although nothing about his situation had changed, the waves in his head had calmed, and while the storm was still there, it was far easier to ignore than it had been earlier. As they walked, Wilbur rubbed his hands together, trying to get the feeling back into his fingertips. They passed by the library, not stopping since Wilbur wanted to go change into a thicker coat. But he ended up pausing mid-step when he heard shuffling come from behind the shut door. None of you ever listen to me! What's the point of me being here if you just ignore me every time I try to give an opinion? Even through the door, it wasn't hard to recognize Ames's voice. Wilbur held a hand up to Jack to get him to stop walking, eyeing the library door. He'd never heard Amesy sound that angry before. In fact, he was pretty sure he'd never heard them get angry before, period. It just wasn't the type of person they were. There were some muffled voices Wilbur couldn't make out on the other side of the door. Then, the door was sliding open, and Wilbur stumbled back as Amesy stormed out. Right before the door shut, he spotted 3 other Flora gathered in the library. They ignored him in favor of focusing on Amesy, who didn't look back as they hurried past him. None of the Flora went after them. "Amesy, where are you going?" Wilbur asked after the door shut, turning to follow them down the hall. "Leave me alone, Wilbur!" They snapped, the flowers in their hair shrinking back. For a moment, Wilbur considered letting them go. This wasn't his problem. Amesy was clearly upset and wanted to be left alone. If he tried to talk to them, it would probably just upset them more. But at the same time, Wilbur was alarmed. This wasn't normal for Amesy. They didn't get angry like this. At least, not the Amesy he remembered knowing on Eldingvegger all those years ago. Wilbur might have been an asshole, but he liked to think he was self-aware. At least enough to know that he hadn't been very nice to Amesy since that first day they ran into each other in the dining hall. They had tried to talk to him again and again, And while he still wasn't sure if he could fully trust them, he was starting to hate the fact that his paranoia was tainting every aspect of his life. Today was already such a strange day for Wilbur. His honesty with Filza, giving Jack permission to use his name. Why not listen to his gut and go after one of the only people on this entire planet that he could call a friend? Amesy, stop! Wilbur said, grabbing their arm and tugging them back. Amesy tried to rip their arm out of his grip, but he didn't let go. After a few seconds of fighting, they let out a heaving sigh and gave him a pained look over their shoulder. Please, Will. Not right now. Wilbur recognized that tone. It was anger laced with defeat and the urge to cry, and he knew how much effort it took to hold all of that in. He knew that all too well, but it sounded so foreign coming from Amesy's mouth that it was almost like he didn't recognize the person in front of him at all. No, not until you tell me what's going on, Wilbur said, still holding their arm. Huffing, Amesy took a deep breath, their eyes fluttering shut. After a few beats, they opened them again and plastered on a painfully fake smile. I'm fine, Will. Seriously, I'm perfectly fine. Amesy, you were shouting back there. I've never heard you shout like that before, Wilbur pointed out. The smile fell from their face at that. The flowers on their cheeks drooped, and when it became clear they weren't going to run again, Wilbur let go of their arm. I just don't get it, they muttered, cradling their arm to their chest. I'm supposed to be part of this diplomatic party, but the other flower don't listen to me. I try to give my opinions and I immediately just get shut down. They say it's because I'm one of the youngest, but I've been training to be a diplomat since I was a kid. I'm not an idiot. I know what I'm talking about. Wilbur's jaw clenched as Amesy took a shuddering breath. Their shoulders hunched as they curled in on themselves. I just don't get why I'm here if I can't do my job. Well, Wilbur knew that feeling all too well. Yeah, I know what that's like, Wilbur muttered, folding his arms over his chest. It's like no matter what you do, it doesn't change anything. You're told you're an important piece to this, but the outcome was decided for you before you even set foot on the board. Amesy nodded. They sniffled. Yeah, that's exactly it. I'm not doing anything here. It just makes me feel so useless. At this, Filza's voice flashed through his head. You don't know who you are because you've always been trying to be what others want, but it's never been enough. Then Technoblades. If you want Theseus to stop spending time with me, you're gonna have to take that up with him. And then Tommy's. You gotta stop calling me Theseus when it's just us. Nothing Wilbur did was changing anything. He was trying so hard, but it was never enough. It had never been enough. Not even back on Eldingvegger. He was always ignored, disregarded, or outright insulted. His presence was treated like a burden, even when he was a child. He always tried to be what they wanted, even when they despised him. Because it was the only hope he had that he would find his place one day. Break himself apart so he could match a silhouette not made for him. Watch the pieces of his psyche crumble in his hands. let the waves beat him down again and again and again until his pillar dissolved completely. "I'm sorry," Wilbur said, digging his nails into his palm. "That's not fair to you at all." Amesy sniffed again, wiping their eyes before any tears could fall. "It's not fair to you either." And it wasn't. Wilbur knew it wasn't. It had never been fair to him, but it was the card he drew in life. "Sorry, I just..." Amesy let out a shuddering breath. "Fuck, I just miss her so much. So much." Wilbur blinked. "Who?" "Just someone back on Flosslium who I haven't seen in a while," Amesy said, giving him a weak smile. "I think I'm gonna go see if I can call them. It's late over there, but they might still be awake." "That'll probably help," Wilbur muttered, although he was more focused on the heat in his veins melting away the ice inside of him once again. "Thanks for, talking to me, Will," Amesy said, taking a step back. "See you later." And with that, they disappeared around the corner, leaving Wilbur alone with Jack once again. Neither one spoke as they made their way back to Wilbur and Tommy's room. Once there, Wilbur said his goodbyes to Jack before rushing inside, his head spinning again just like it had been before. Amesie's words had stirred something inside of him, reminded him of how useless he's felt his whole goddamn life, how he tried to be everything Eldingvegger wanted him to be, but it was never enough for them. Collapsing on the bed, Wilbur twisted his fingers into his hair and pulled as hard as he could. The flash of pain grounded him, but only for a moment. He was too frustrated, too angry, too exhausted. It was so much. The futility of it all. No matter who he tried to be, it wasn't right. No matter where he tried to go, it was the wrong path. The waves were deafening as he pulled a pillow over his face and screamed into it as loud as he could. Thank God. I don't know how much more I could have taken. That last bit got a bit too real there for me, I will admit. I should not have streamed tonight. Yeah, I think that's gonna be my stream. I hope you guys enjoyed for as little energy as there was for the most part. I don't know when I'm gonna be live next. It's probably gonna be me playing MCC Island like I normally do. But if you want to see me play Omori, that's my sub goal. Be sure to follow me on Twitter or join my Discord if you want to get updates on when I'm going to be live. I usually make them that day, ranging from like 2 hours to like 30 minutes before. I'm a bit of a mess. Just in general. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching. the fuck? I don't know if you heard that. Anyway. See you guys next time. Bye.